Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part one of my build of my very big Spindrift 3D printed from Land of the Giants, and also the fantastic interior from Randy Cooper that I will be putting inside of it, of course. This is going to be a long-term build alongside of my Discovery build, as both of these take quite a bit of time to do all the intricate parts of them, for very different reasons too. This particular one is going to take a lot of sanding and filling and getting the 3D printed exterior down to a smooth finish. But let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so work begins on my very giant 3D printed Spindrift, and I was just waiting on getting in some CA glue that's odorless. I get this from a local hobby shop. They've been having a hard time getting it in. They finally got some in. I need to get some more of it still, because I'm going to use a lot of this. But I can't use the regular CA glue because it really tears up my sinuses and burns my eyes unless I'm wearing a big respirator, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. So this has no odor, doesn't irritate me at all, works great. It glues things together. So all the parts of this kit are going to have to be put together with CA glue and or 5-minute epoxy. So I've started with the back tail fin, which comes in 4 parts. So I have them glued together. Definitely gives me a little bit of working time. It says that it's 5 to 20 seconds, so it's a little bit of time. Get them positioned, get them lined up. And these are the easiest parts because they're nice and flat. So a couple of clamps, let them sit for a little bit, set up and harden, and then I can get this piece glued up to here and then have the whole thing done. So, okay. All right, and then here is the completed tail fin for the ship. Well, it's completed in the fact that it's glued together. Went together very nicely. These parts really do fit together nice and snug, which is great. This should be nice and solid as far as the CA glue is concerned. Some of the other parts I'm going to reinforce with some 5-minute epoxy. This one I really can't, obviously, since it's flat, but it should be fine. Certainly it's going to still need some cleanup and sanding, and that'll be the next step on this. So all right, so on to work on some of the other parts. All right, so I completed the bottom. Now I didn't really show gluing. It's three parts, so I didn't really take the time to show gluing this one on and then gluing the back on. Before I did that though, you can see this is all kind of choppy and rough. While these are still separate pieces, I took a Dremel and I cut off the parts down to this level, which is what Randy indicated on his video you have to do in order for the interior to go into it and fit. Since this wasn't designed originally with an interior, and Randy's hadn't been built at that point, so there was no they didn't really make these supports in order to accommodate that. So I got those cut down. It's okay if they're kind of rough, and I can sand a little bit more if I need to. But I wanted to do that before I glued these together, so I wasn't dealing with a really big giant piece, which is what I have right here. So but these went together really well. That one especially, you can see how close, a little bit of a slight gap, but these are all going to be sanded, and a lot of this roughness has to be brought down anyway. So same with right there. That lined up well. So initially I used clamps on the tail fin, and I was going to use them on this, but I find that with this curved surfaces, if I put a clamp here, for example, it tended to pull this off, or it would make this not line up right, and especially with this really large one. So it was just as easy to simply set this up like on the middle section at first, and then just glue this on, line it up, and then hold it in place until it started to set. And the same thing with the bottom until it finished the glue setting. There's a little bit of work time on this. It's 5 to 20 seconds, they say, but actually good minute Probably about 30 seconds of work time, I would say, before it starts to catch. And then you want to make sure it's positioned at that point, because it's going to start to set up. And then once it was solid enough, I took some of the CA glue and I just liberally put it along these edges inside to further reinforce it. And then, because this is an interior piece that you're not going to see, I'm going to go back and fill in some 5-minute epoxy along these joints as well, just to make sure that they're nice and sturdy and solid. But I don't think it's going to be a problem. This is a nice solid piece right now, and it's I don't think anything's going to break off on that, but just to be sure. So what I want to do now, before I glue on the top of the back engine unit or the back grill part, I want to go in and start fitting the interior and taping it again to make sure that I don't need to cut any more of this down, because it would be far easier to do that without this part being on here. But ultimately, it's a very big kit, but it's really not a lot of parts for the exterior. I mean, the bottom's done. I have 3 pieces, well, 5 pieces if you count the opening, 6 pieces, I'm sorry, in the 2 engine grills. And then the top lid is another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, including the intake grills. So I'm going to glue all of the bottom and the engine parts together, and I'm going to glue the lid or the top and all those pieces together, and they'll be separate. And then I'll sand them and clean them up separately, and they can even be painted pretty much completely before I end up gluing it all together. Because at the end, I'm going to have the big seam that's going to be right here where those intake grills go on, and I'm going to have the seams just right along here on either side. But that's going to be it. But other than that, I mean, I'll already have these seams done and cleaned, painted, smooth, the back, everything else. And I can even glue the part on the front here for the cockpit window and be ready to go for that as well. So, okay, so right now I want to go ahead and start fitting together the interior again and putting it in here and just kind of see how that's going to fit. All right, so I'm doing some test fitting to see if this is low enough to go inside the ship. So the height is okay for the moment, but there's going to be more on top of the interior as far as the lighting, but there's still some space. I can move my hand in and out of there, so that part isn't too bad. Now, the key things that I have to have happen excuse me, is that the windows have to line up on the passenger section, and the front cockpit has to be in the right position and line up to work in the front as well. So right now those aren't happening. Let me show you here. So the cockpit is closed, but you can see that the control panel is up too high. It shouldn't be right at the edge of this window. So this has to drop down, obviously. And likewise, the windows in the passenger section, which I would imagine, you know, obviously would be the same issue, they're too high. So this has to come down considerably. So I'm probably gonna have to pretty much take out all of that support underneath, because that's a good distance right there, right off the bat. Now, another thing I can do as well, which I wanted to work on, is that the floor is pretty thick. It's really thick. And it's obvious that it was inverted and then it was poured. So the bottom surface can be sanded somewhat as well. All right, so I still have to do some more work on that before I'm ready to glue any of the back engine roof on, so I get this all in the right position to where it's going to go. So, all right, but we're getting closer for sure. All right, and here's the floor piece. So it's one big piece. It's really thick. But if you look underneath it, turn this over here. Sorry. Obviously, this is the top of the pour, and it went down into into the parts that are detailed. So that part can be sanded, certainly. I can do some sanding on that, smooth that out some more, and gain a little bit of extra space, because that's pretty thick. Pretty much that end piece right there is the thickness of this floor. There are thicker parts, of course, as you can see, but that's the part that I would mainly have to just, you know, not go too thin on, and I can sand that down. But likewise, I can take these pieces down some more. I might even just like nearly eliminate them altogether. I can always add some things to raise it up, but obviously I have to take it as low as I can. So, all right, so definitely some more work before I'm ready to get anything more glued onto this bottom section. I think I'll go ahead and get the parts for the top front glued together, because that's not going to affect anything. All right, so that went together pretty easily. So here's the top lid. Not too bad. So really, well, other than the rough surface, of course, the only seam I have to worry about is this one right here. And just a little bit right there in the front of that, because most of this is going to be cut out. Just a little bit of it will remain wherever the clear dome doesn't go in, but even that part can be covered up with some flat styrene. And then this whole groove is where the part of the tail fin goes into. So, all right, so that's all together. Likewise, I'll be putting in some 5-minute epoxy once I get some more to strengthen up that that interior. Hi, you want to say hi to the camera? Hi, Mocha. I'm sorry, I don't think you want to help me with this. All right, so now on to some more cutting out of the bottom so that the interior will fit inside of the ship. All right, so a lot more work on the interior. I'm sorry, the inside of the bottom exterior, cutting away the supports. I cut away almost all of it. I had to use a Dremel to cut through most, and then I went back in with an orbital sander, which got all chewed up quite a bit, to try to sand those down. Pretty hardy supports, so they were kind of tricky, but they were almost completely gone. There's just a little bit remaining. So it should work a lot better. I also did a cursory sanding on the outside, and it's looking pretty good, actually. I mean, it looks rough, of course, but the idea with the main sanding is just to get it fairly even consistency. By no means am I expecting to take down all of the little grooves and things like that, but it looks fairly consistent, and that again was with the orbital sander. Went over it a couple of times, put a little more CA glue in the gaps, and used a kicker on it, and then sanded that down some more, and up here also. So it's looking fairly smooth. There's a few deeper grooves here. What I might use, and the makers of this kit suggested using some wood putty, just regular wood putty, which I'll probably get, which would work pretty well. It goes on smooth, and then you can sand it smooth as well. And most of this is going to be made smooth by using the filler primer. That's going to be the main thing that's going to bring that about, to give me a nice smooth finish. I'm not going to achieve that by sanding or anything like that, just because it's of the material, the 3D printed plastic, or I think it's PLA. So let me go ahead and show you how that interior fits, because it does fit better now on the inside now. All right, so I got the bottom sanded down some more, and I'm fitting the interior in, trying to get some ideas of how to go about this. Originally, the way Randy Cooper had done it is he had glued together the back, obviously, into the bottom, put the interior in, and then put the front on the top. I'm just wondering if it would be easier to glue the front on, like I have here, and insert the interior in through here. It does fit. I don't have it totally glued together, but I have it taped together. And there's enough clearance. Even when I put some lights on the top, I should probably be okay to get it in there. I'll have to play with it some more. But the benefit of doing that would be to be able to get this whole seam on either side glued, the front glued together, everything glued together, and then get it all painted. I'd even have like the grills on here before I put the interior in. And then that way I just have to put this top part in the back, of course, and the fins. I don't know, that's kind of tricky because then I got to do the back. Well, I could still do that. I'll have to play with it and see. But it's certainly fitting better. It's down lower where it needs to be. I might do just a little more grinding. Pretty much all of it's almost removed at this point, except a little bit of pieces. So, but I do have it fitting in there better and lining up in the front and lining up on the sides where the windows are, and that's really where it has to match up, so that the outer part of the windows, obviously in the cockpit, see in correctly where they're supposed to be. So, okay. All right, so I brought this outside. I sanded down the wood putty. Worked pretty good. Gives it a semi-smooth finish, like I said, so I get a nice overall finish, and then I can use some Rust-Oleum filler primer, and I'll need several coats. So I'm going to go ahead and get a single coat on this first of all and take a look, and that'll reveal a lot of the areas that I still need to work, which will be a lot, of course. And then I'll sand it some more and put on some more. So, all right, let me go ahead and get a coat on there. All right, so I got a couple of coats of sandable primer, filler primer on here. It feels a lot smoother. I'm starting to get some parts that look smoother, but then I still have like this here, obvious striations here and along here. So it's definitely going to take quite a lot. Certain parts like this I can still see. I'm going to have to fill that in a bit. There's a raised section right around here, and then right along here that I need to fill in. So I might do some more putty really thin on it. This wood putty can be watered down a bit, so I think I can try that, maybe put it on and have a wet rag and kind of smooth it out a bit, and then do a little more sanding. But it's definitely a whole lot smoother, and I can tell just by rubbing my hand along it. So it'll get there eventually, but it's going to take quite a lot of primer for sure. But looking pretty good so far. All right, so I got those other areas patched and sanded down and did some more primer over it. But then I started getting some of these little cracks in the areas. You can see over here. And I've sanded them down a little bit, but I'm assuming it must have something to do with maybe the putty. You can see some over here too. Maybe reacting with the primer. I'm not sure. It's really weird. So I'm going to switch over to Bondo, their red Spot Putty, and try using that instead. That's designed to work with this type of material. It's definitely a lot smoother, but I have to patch up those areas that are now kind of cracky. This needs a little more sanding, some wet sanding. Wet sanding seems to work really well. I need to get some better sandpaper that will hold up to it, that's designed for wet sanding. Been using some cheap stuff. So, but let me go ahead and work on getting some of those cracks past, but we're definitely coming closer to getting a smooth finish on the bottom of the Spindrift. All right, so as you saw from the previous still, I used some Bondo Spot Putty to fill in some gaps and let it dry overnight. And then I've gone over and I've sanded this down. I got some better sandpaper. I picked up some 3M 400 grit. It's wet dry sandpaper, which is really nice. It stays together I was using some cheap sandpaper and it would just fall apart when I made it wet. So this stays nice and solid while I'm doing it, and it got a really nice finish. It's really super smooth feeling. I need to get another coating of primer on it in order to see any further blemishes, but it's really very nearly there. So what I'm going to do is put another coat of Rust-Oleum filler and sandable primer, and hopefully that'll finish up any of the blemishes that I have. I've also added on the little, whatever this is, antenna or stem on the front. That one's a little bit rough, but I want to get some primer on it before I see what I need to do with it. And I'll still have to do some more sanding in this little area. So, and it looks like there's some marks here, but really it feels a lot smoother than it looks. And again, once I get the other primer on, it should show me any further blemishes that I need to do. But definitely the wet sanding is the way to go. It does get a lot smoother finish on this bottom. So let me go ahead and primer that up and we'll see where we are. All right, there we go. So that looks a whole lot better. It's a lot more even and smooth. I can still go over it lightly with a wet sanding with the 400 grit and smooth that down even more. I still have to do a little bit around this little area here. You can see a little divot there and little rough edges around it, but it's definitely almost there. It's a lot smoother than it was. Sorry, it's so big here. and going on pretty good. So, all right. So definitely like that approach. That's what I'm going to continue on the rest of the ship, as far as sanding it with the wet sanding and getting it down to, or using the Spot Putty from Bondo, and then just putting on the different thick primer on there. So, okay. So that's starting to look like the bottom of the ship, and looking pretty sweet. All right. All right, so now that I've kind of got the bottom hashed out and know the general idea of what I have to do on the rest of the outside of the ship to get it to be smooth, I'm going to go ahead and focus on the interior and start getting it built up, because this will help me decide what kind of tolerances I'm going to have. If I can slide it in from the back and glue the front on first so I can clean that seam up, or if I want to put the back on first and do it the way that you would normally do. So let me show you real quick what else I've gotten, which I was able to find at a local hobby shop. Some figures from a company called Master Box Limited, and they make a whole bunch of different figures. They're mainly made, I guess, for like car models or truck models and different things like that. And they have a lot of different things. So I looked through the ones that they had there and found several that will be able to work really well for the characters from Land of the Giants. I'll have to do a little bit of modification on some of them, but some of them were really quite good. Like these two here, Bob and Sally, the happy couple, work out really well to be Steve and what is her name? The stewardess. It'll come to me in a moment. But this one looks really cool for Steve. I'll have to sand down some of his outfit so it doesn't look like a sweater, and make it look like his red jumpsuit, but he looks pretty cool. And they are the right scale. They're 1/25 scale, so they look pretty cool as far as the size scale. Oh, Betty's the stewardess, sorry. But she looks really good. I can paint her with the leggings. I think they're like yellow or orange, and some yellow and orange in her stewardess outfit, so she's going to be pretty cool. And give her some blonde hair, of course. So these come in a couple parts. You just glue them together, usually like the upper torso, the bottom, the legs, the arms, the head. Sometimes the hair is separate, that sort of thing. But yeah, pretty cool. So these are going to be really nice, and it's kind of tricky to find them in the right scale. Let me show you a few others that I got. So I have this one. So I'm looking to adapt this figure here to be Valerie, because again, she kind of looks like it. And I can not put the hat on her and that sort of thing, paint her hair blonde, things like that. I wanted to get a seated figure, so I got this one, the guy on the right, that I'm going to make into Dan. I will just have to modify his hair to be the right one. And you can see it's made for like a truck model. That's why they show them sitting in a truck. And there's kind of how the parts come in them. So I got him to be a seated figure. And again, I'll just have to adapt the way that his hair looks and that sort of thing. I got this one here to be Mark. And that one looks pretty cool. And these aren't going to be perfect, of course, but they're going to be close enough so they kind of represent the 7 people in the crew. This one was a little harder, trying to get Barry. Obviously, he's older than what Barry would be, but I'm hoping he'll be okay. And the dog I have to adapt so he's not in that pose and kind of make him look more like the scruffy dog that he has. And then the last one was also very hard. For Fitzhugh, I got this guy because he's a little bit heavier and he has kind of a belly on him. But he's bald, so that's nice. I can just sculpt on some hair, so that should be pretty cool. And figure out. He has his leg in that pose there. I'm thinking maybe I can put it onto the suitcase, because he always has his suitcase of money. I'll show you, which I also have a suitcase with these two. So I can adapt that suitcase to paint it silver and make it his ill-gotten gain that he brought onto the flight and promptly loses in the first episode. So, all right. So fantastic. I think these will be great. Definitely be able to adapt them and have them a couple in the cockpit, and then obviously more in the passenger section to really augment this kit. So, all right. All right, so that's going to wrap up the video for this week. As I said, I will continue working on this alongside of the Discovery. So you're probably going to see some alternating videos back and forth as I work with different parts of them. As I said, very different things. Working on the large Spindrift has very different types of work that I have to do, as opposed to the very tiny wiring and lighting for the Discovery. So, all right. So thank you to all my new subscribers. Stay tuned. Definitely gonna be working on this kit some more, and I'm gonna start focusing on the interior next to see about how I want to get that fit into the outer ship. All right, thanks a lot.